Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
I call on the Honourable Member Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker. Ngā mihi kia koutou. Kia ora. It's great to take a call on the student loan scheme bill, a government bill going through under urgency. I think student loan issues are urgent and we should be dealing with them, but a bill of this nature, which essentially is tinkering around the edges, isn't the type of thing we should be addressing under urgency. I think when you look at the student loan burden across the country, we're looking at in excess of $11 billion. That's on the shoulders of more than 560,000 Kiwis. This is an urgent crisis and this bill doesn't address it. And my big fear, Mr. Speaker, is in fact this bill will be prolonging the student loan debt burden on those hundreds of thousands of Kiwis for months and years, with only minuscule benefit. What student loans have been since they were first introduced in 1992 is a massive experiment with our tertiary education sector graduates. We've got a massive $11 billion currently outstanding, and this loan debt is growing at $1 billion a year, a fantastically huge sum at a time when the government is borrowing such considerable amounts. The curious nature about student loans is in fact it's down on the government books as an asset. Now we wonder, if you looked at the government books, which aren't in great shape at the moment, what would be the consequences if we took this asset and did something else with it? What it is, of course, is a massive drag on our economy, it's a massive drag on students, and it's a massive drag on society. So I'd like to acknowledge and thank the submitters in the Select Committee. I'd like to thank the officials, the Chair. We didn't have a huge number of submissions in the committee on this bill because ultimately this is a pretty small scale in its intent bill. Essentially what this bill does is tightens up rules around overseas graduates with loans. It adds administration fees, and most critically it brings in electronic management of student loans. Now, Mr. Speaker, I can't believe in 2011 we're now getting around to electronic management of loans. It's amazing that in 2011 we're finally getting to this. This could have been done a long, long time ago. And the member is correct. It is a good question to ask the Labour members. Why wasn't this progress sooner under the 9 years they were in government? It makes common sense. Graduates, those 560,000 Kiwis...
Order. Can I say to the member on my left and my right, that interjections are only permitted when they're at the person who's actually addressing the House. Interjections between each other with members having their own private debate is not in order. Call the Honourable Member Gareth Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a good example that students have been failed by both governments, both of different hues. But the fact is, the fact is, Mr. Speaker, it's good that we're finally getting around to electronic management of loans. It's amazing that we've waited to 2011, given the internet has been around for such a long time and is such a key tool and will actually increase the cost effectiveness and the efficiencies of the student loan administration by the government. So we oppose some parts of the bill and we support other parts of the bill. We support the intent of the legislation to increase the effectiveness, reduce administration costs, and in particular the electronic management, but we are opposed to the imposition of additional fees on students. These are Kiwis in New Zealand. Some of the most poorest Kiwis are on student loans. They're effectively beneficiaries. These are the least able to handle additional fee costs on them, especially in this current economic environment. So what this bill does is bring in a $60 student loan establishment fee and an annual $40 student loan administration fee. These are substantial figures for people when it might not seem like much to members in this chamber who have just received a 5% tax cut, a tax cut for the rich, it's been called in the public. Yet what we're seeing is on some of the poorest New Zealanders, those facing GST rises, those facing rises of petrol and other costs of living, we're seeing this government putting additional burdens on them, and we think this bill as bad in this respect. It would have been good to have gotten rid of this in Select Committee, because ultimately what we heard from officials was the Inland Revenue Department is investing in updated computer software and infrastructure, so actually there's no need for additional costs for a student to pay. This is only going to raise, I understand, around $14 million, a tiny drop in the bucket compared to what this government's spending on motorways, which is in excess of $19 billion. So why we're opposed to administration fees on students is it adds to the burden which students are already struggling under. It adds to the repayment time, increasing that burden over the course of their student loan graduates' repayment. And lastly, it refuses the effectiveness of the voluntary bonus, which we think is a good thing. We think we should be looking for more carrots as opposed to sticks. We support voluntary bonuses. We support, in fact, Mr. Speaker, writing off a year's student loan debt for the graduates' year they stay in New Zealand. What we want to see is Kiwis stay in New Zealand, especially after they've graduated, and we think carrots a much better way instead of looking at the path of debt collectors or charging extra fees on it. Before I get into the substance of the bill and the reasons why we're opposed to the admin fees, I just want to make a quick point that it's good that this bill doesn't introduce interest on student loans. I'm sure the government benches are looking forward to that announcement if it comes. I hope the National Party doesn't announce bringing back interest on student loans. It was a shame we had interest under a Labour government for so many years, and I feel rightly they should have reduced it earlier. They waited till 2006. Obviously it won the election for them, a vastly popular issue. And of course when you look, a huge proportion of this country, around a sixth, 560,000 Kiwis have a loan. This has made a significant difference to the burden facing Kiwi graduates, and I'd like to acknowledge that Labour did do it, and it's good that this bill doesn't take it away. But what I'd like to hear from the government benches is confirmation they will not be bringing back interest on student loans. So the fees, the $60 and the $40 fee, does add to the student debt burden. It's not the way we should be going forward. We should be debating how we can increase fees, how we can decrease student fees, decrease the student loan burden. And my big fear is because interest-free student loans are just so popular in this country, what the government's doing is trying to imply interest by stealth. The big fear is that, of course, these admin fees are interest by stealth. The government benches dearly, I'm sure, want to bring back interest on student loans, and that was the accusation we heard in the Select Committee, that in fact this is interest by stealth. The fact is we've got a good system of the repayment threshold already. Once a graduate with a loan starts earning over the threshold 10% of the salary is docked automatically to go to IRD. I imagine I'm probably the only member in this chamber whose 10% of my salary goes direct to IRD as I slowly but surely pay off my student loan burden. And the fact is we've got this already. NZUSA, in their submission, called this a new tax, and they said quite rightly, for those people in the community worried about taxes and hearing the tax rhetoric from this government, students, those 560,000 who will be lumped with these new fees, will see this as a tax. So it's going to increase the repayment time. If you look at the last student loan report, the median repayment time is 6.6 years for someone who graduated in 2004. That's an awfully long time, Mr. Speaker, especially for many of these students in their early 20s, late 20s who are thinking about starting a family. And this is part of the reason we're seeing such a big demographic shift over the course of the student loan scheme's history since 1992, is that people are delaying having families, they're delaying buying a home if they can live the dream and actually afford a home. And what we're seeing with the repayment times is a gender imbalance. We're seeing females take longer than males to pay it off. Thirdly, we're seeing this bill reducing the effectiveness on the voluntary repayment bonus. We think carrots are a good idea as opposed to sticks. We support the voluntary bonus. But the fact is, say a graduate makes a $500 voluntary repayment on their loan, they get a $50 bonus from the government. The fact is $40 has already gone straight to the government in these new administration fees, this interest by stealth, these tax increases for the poor, as it was described in the Select Committee. Ultimately, what's going to do is reduce the effectiveness of the voluntary repayment bonus, because people are going to say, well, why bother? I'm already having to pay these new admin fees. I'm just not going to do it. So the second part of the bill, which maybe I'll talk on in other calls, Mr. Speaker, is the pay period. We do have some concerns around the changes to the pay period. It's going to disadvantage those hard-working part-time students that earn the bulk of their income over the summer, picking fruit, working the freezing works, whatever. The fact is there are exemptions available for those students, but I doubt many students will first of all be aware or be able to do it. It's probably going to be a lengthy process. It'd be good to hear from the Minister how we can make it easier for these students once this legislation passes to access these exemptions. So in summary, Mr Speaker, we support elements of the bill, we oppose other elements of the bills. What we ultimately need is a big discussion of what student loans mean in the future and how we can reduce the student loan debt burden for students. Kia ora.
I call